and welcome back to Book and Page. We're on to the third video of the Bacchae, which is actually scene 2, because there was a prologue. So we're on to scene 2, technically. So let's do a quick summary, and then we'll get to talking about what actually went down, and how it went down. So, summary-wise, Dionysus in human form is brought before Pentheus as a willing captive, while the other captives, oops, they got out. Sorry about that, Pentheus. Pentheus then proceeds to talk about how just dang pretty the disguised Dionysus actually is, before, finally questioning him. The two men have back and forth, while Pentheus tries to learn about the rites, fails, and then tries to actually strip the rites from this disguised Dionysus and his followers. Finally, he jails the human Dionysus and plans to enslave the chorus. Not a good plan, Pentheus. Not a good plan. And the scene ends, of course, with that chorus coming back in with a threefold message this time. One, reminding Pentheus and Thebes that Dionysus is in fact a god recognized by Zeus. So maybe calm yourselves down. And by calm yourselves down, I mean go dancing and drinking. Who doesn't want to party? Two, highlighting that Pentheus, in interfering with the rites, will have angered the gods. This isn't a good place to be, Pentheus. And 3, calling for everyone else to ignore Pentheus and go join the festivities. A.k.a. dancing and drinking. Guys, don't listen to your king, he's an idiot! Might be a little freaked out, but the women's just running mad, but So, a bit of an interesting chapter for just what's all stacked on top of each other. Between this conversation with, I'm just gonna call him Dionysus, recognized he's a disguised Dionysus. Pentheus doesn't know it's him, he just thinks he's another human initiate. And that's what really they talk about. So let's take a look at this conversation that just dominates this scene. And I mean, dominates the scene. Like, it's just a whole lot of back and forth for a good portion of the scene. So when you get something like this, where it is really two characters going back and forth for most of the scene, there are really two things you should track. 1, what they're actually discussing, and 2, who remains in control of the scene. Now, what they're actually discussing is relatively easy to track. It is a discussion of the Dionysian or the Bacchic rites, and who's allowed to know them, what they entail. Well, we don't hear about that because people who are not initiates in these rites aren't allowed to know them. So, information-wise, easy enough to track. The control issue, though, is really interesting. And once you start doing this with a lot of other conversations, particularly in plays, I found you can't stop trying to track who stays in control of these conversations. And this one is a really interesting one to go off of, because we have Dionysus and Pentheus. So we have a god, and we have a king. And both of them probably figure they're more in control of this conversation. But Pentheus states it several times. Like, several times throughout the scene he says, I have this man in my power, he will not escape me. So part of it is in knowing who you're up against and not overestimating your own control due to that. So what we have is Pentheus assuming he's up against some sort of commoner, and so obviously the king has more power. even if we didn't know this guy was Dionysus, the switch you'd need to see is Pentheus, a king, up against some sort of religious leader. And the moment I say something like that, any of you know European history or anything like that are just going like, oh, that's a lot closer now. It's a lot closer now. Pope and king. So, the issue then, of course, is we also know that it is in fact Dionysus. So, we start to see the power shift. But, should Pentheus be aware of it? Yes. Because the guard gives some crucial information right at the beginning. So we have this guard come in with Dionysus, and he tells them, like, you sent me to capture him? He came willingly. Literally, like, just came along. So, I apologize to him. But, here he is. So, like, Dionysus is part of this conversation willingly. He has not been taken into anybody's power or control. He's just come along because, yes, let's have a conversation. And so we suddenly have a closer balance because both people have at least joined this conversation willingly. Except again, I said that crucial information from the guard here, and it's not just that Dionysus has joined this conversation willingly. It's also that he's sort of on Dionysus' side. Like, he literally apologized for having to do Pentheus' bidding. No, none of the common folk really want to accidentally, or on purpose, insult any gods. Like, no one wants to do that. No one wants to get struck down. And certainly no one wants to get struck down because they're just obeying their king. So, like, when the guard comes to get him, he's just like, I am taking a religious figure into custody. I am really sorry about this, but I have to obey my king. So the fact that, like, Dionysus doesn't fight here, and he also doesn't, like, strike down the guard by any sense. We don't get the feeling that, like, he smote this poor man. That's winning some points. It's just sort of this recognition of, like, yeah, you're just doing what you're supposed to. It's fine. I don't blame you. So, like, the guard already seems to be on Dionysus' side rather than Pentheus's. Because he, like, in apologizing is saying, Pentheus is wrong to do this, but I have to do this because Pentheus has asked me to do this. So, already we've got the common folk, not as the audience, but as part of, like, the play itself, leaning towards Dionysus' side. So right from the beginning of this conversation, no matter how many times Pentheus can yell that he's in control, he is not in control of this conversation. And you can see it really clearly in the conversation itself. Because while Pentheus might be the one asking the questions, it is Dionysus who is controlling the flow of information. He redirects and sometimes outright refuses to answer questions as often as he wants to. There are a couple of points where, in talking about the rites, what's the good of these rituals to people who celebrate them? Hearing that is forbidden to you, but knowing it would be of value. I can't tell you that. I mean, it'd be helpful, but I can't tell you that. Cool, Pentheus, you gonna push him on this? What a neat quibble. Now I really want to hear. Keep up that irreverence and the dance will turn hostile. That was a direct threat. Now you say you saw the god clearly. What did he look like? We know full well that Pentheus can't force any answers. But for the most part, he doesn't even try to. That was like a full-on change of topic. Because Dionysus threatened him. the dance will turn hostile. And Pentheus is like, let's talk about something else then. Who is in control of this conversation, Pentheus? It ain't you. It ain't you. And the fact is, one, Dionysus refused to answer and Pentheus didn't press him. And two, Dionysus directly threatened the king of Thebes and Pentheus didn't do anything about it. Like, just, oh, we're just gonna keep this conversation going? Okay. And truth be told, along with that threat, Dionysus, like, insults him pretty regularly. He says things like, I'm not gonna be able to find it here. He says, speak wisdom to a fool, and he'll think you have no sense at all. Who's the fool in this situation? Pentheus. There's a couple of times where he says that, Pentheus says, that's because foreigners have little sense compared to us. Dionysus says, in this case, much, much more. Okay, obviously you're senseless, or have very little sense. Gonna do anything about that, Pentheus? No, because directly after that, you practice this cult by day or by night. Again, Pentheus doesn't, press for answers. He doesn't respond appropriately to a direct threat. He doesn't seem to get upset by any insults. Now, these last two, it could sort of show, oh, then isn't Pentheus more in control, because he's not getting upset at this direct threat. He's not getting upset at these insults. Well, one, the issue with the direct threat is Dionysus warns him off and Pentheus obeys. With these insults, sure, maybe Pentheus is in control. He's not coming down to Dionysus' level on this one. But the start of this conversation and his entire rant by Pentheus about how pretty Dionysus actually is. So, Pentheus, again, from the outset of this conversation, has established that he's willing to more talk about the person than the issue at hand. So, the insults are sort of... there's a standard set for it already by Pentheus at the beginning, when he's talking about / complimenting / insulting the disguised Dionysus. I'm just gonna read this. Well, not bad. You're actually quite good looking. I mean, to women. Of course, that's why you came to Thebes. This long hair of yours. You're no wrestler, are you? These curls along your cheek, oh, they'll swoon for you. And this fine complexion, you had to work on that, staying out of the sun in shadows, hunting with your pretty face for sex Aphrodite's business. That's a weird way to start this conversation, Pentheus. So, as we go through, like, Pentheus does not have control of this conversation. And thus, in the end, it is Pentheus who, in fact, loses control of his emotions and just sort of kaputs the entire conversation by demanding that Dionysus be taken to the cowshed. And he does it because he says that Dionysus has, in fact, insulted him with... This is the exchange. So he's asked about whether Dionysus is here, and Dionysus says, even now he's near, and he sees that I am suffering. Then where is he? He hasn't revealed himself to me. He is where I am. You do not see him because you lack reverence. Grab him. He has insulted me and Thebes. Was it the irreverence? Because Dionysus has been calling Pentheus irreverent multiple times throughout this conversation. So why now has Pentheus suddenly lost control and demanded that the disguised Dionysus be thrown into the cowshed / jail? Apparently they don't have, like, real proper jail. Well, it seems to be because this person has just called out that, Dionysus hasn't revealed himself to you. He's willing to reveal himself to commoners. He revealed himself to me so that he could teach me the rites. He hasn't done it to you. Like, that seems to be the insult that Pentheus is referring to. Then, again, if Dionysus was in fact not Dionysus, if he was just an initiate, this is not his fault. That's the choice of a god. So, in punishing the commoners, you're acting in bad faith again. And this is why Dionysus won points at the beginning, because he didn't punish the guard for Pentheus' choices. So the fact that Pentheus is then trying to punish the initiates, and it's not just this disguised Dionysus, he directly threatens to enslave the chorus women. That's not good. That is not good at all. But we don't always see how serious that conversation actually is, because this is a humorous line to us. Us in the audience, this is funny. Because we're in on the joke. When Dionysus says, "He is where I am," it's funny, because it's Dionysus. He's there, it's him. We're in on the joke. We laugh about this because we know it's Dionysus in disguise. If Pentheus was more reverent, or accepted Dionysus as a god, then he would know it was Dionysus he was talking to, right? Not quite. Dionysus says this line, but it's not actually quite true, because the chorus women, the initiates, aren't aware that this is Dionysus. They're assuming he's another one of the initiates, and a leader in that way, but an initiate. They don't know that it's Dionysus. Well, are they not reverent enough to recognize it's Dionysus? They call him a comrade in a sacred dance. And in fact, in their song, they call Dionysus to come from wherever he is. Maybe he's out dancing in Asia. Maybe he's up on Mount Olympus. But please, Dionysus, come, for your people are being subjugated. Including this comrade who's now in the cowshed/jail. His own followers don't recognize that this is Dionysus speaking. But it tends to go over our heads as the audience members, because we as the audience are in on the joke. So we can laugh at Pentheus, because Pentheus is the butt of this joke. Except he's not quite. Even if the chorus doesn't know who Dionysus is, can we really say it is purely Pentheus' fault that he does not recognize Dionysus? Probably not. And this is why you need to examine these conversations very closely, because you're tracking control, but now we've also come back to what is said in the conversation. We're being told directly, if Pentheus was more reverent, he would know this was Dionysus. But there's some untruth to that, or at least a mistruth, that we need to be aware of as we track through the rest of this play. How truthful is Dionysus being to the people he's talking with, to his own initiates, and how truthful is he to the audience? How much do we trust Dionysus as a narrator here? Because we're going to find him to be real untruthful in the next little bit, when all of this goes downhill. So, I'm going to keep reading on to scene 3, and I hope you do too. See you next time.